Well, hello, that's me again. Today is Friday, November 4, and as I promised in my last video, it's time to kind of get a little bit on the fundamental issue of the differences, which are crucial, and they explain a lot together with what we look at as the fundamental economic laws, and they explain the geopolitical situation. Obviously, it's not just economy, albeit economy is the most important part of the whole situation. And one of those is, of course, operation of the military-industrial complex, and in this particular case, of two antagonists, two most important antagonists in the modern geopolitics today is the United States and Russia, Russian Federation, but we can also go back to what would be called historic Russia, which was the Soviet Union. It was the other iteration of the Russian Empire. But let me start with something which it seems like not related, but it's actually not only directly related, but it is in the foundation of the profound differences between Russia and the United States in terms of not only war, how they fight the war, and obviously both United States and Russia, they fight wars very differently. But let me start with this. In 1985, Soviet movie director Elem Klimov made a movie. He shot a movie which was called Come and See, which is the phrase from Bible actually. And it was about the fate of the Soviet partisans in Belarus. And he never shot anything after that. He simply retired from this profession because he basically fulfilled his artistic purpose. And you need to keep in mind that Elem Klimov was actually born in Stalingrad. So that kind of explains to you. When it was shown in Cannes in 1985, during the showing of this movie, there were cases of the actually ambulances waiting on the street outside the movie theaters where it was run, because many people simply fainted, and many people had the serious psychiatric episodes because of that. But it also, this Come and See, is considered the greatest war movie ever made, especially in its horror. And I will start with this. And for example, this is, by the way, the shot of the movie from Come and See, and these are not only Wehrmacht and SS people, but there are also Ukrainian nationalist battalions which served as the Polizei. This is how you rape a girl, which basically known as today as the village of Khatyn, which was burned alive, all population of this village. This was demonstrated by Klimov in incredible detail. Then, of course, you can see yourself how you, basically run people, mostly women and children and old men, into their barn, which later would be burned. And this is how you corral them and, bring them there. Then you would see probably one of the most famous shots from this movie. This is against the background of the alive people being burned in this Belarusian village. There were many villages like that, not only in Belarus, they were in Ukraine and in Russia. And this is actually how the war looks like. And again, it is not very popular to mention it, but actually Katyn, as many other atrocities, have been committed both by German SS and regular forces, and obviously by Ukrainian nationalists, which today we know as the regime, Zelensky Kiev regime, and Galicians. So this is the story of this whole thing, and people say, how is this even related to the whole thing? Well, that's the relation, because if you read my first book, Losing Military Supremacy and Myopia of American Strategic Planning, which is now 5 years old, soon to be 6, is the fact that I write about this all the time. It's a war culture and it's war ethos, which actually exists in Russia. Russians remember. How can I forget my grandparents killed in war? How can my wife forget about her grandparents killed in the war? And if you go and you look at 27 million people, most of them civilians who have been obliterated by the by Axis forces, and of course the level of atrocity, especially including, for example, using children as the target practice in Voronezh area, for example. It's one of many. I mean, you go over those things and you remember that. And now when we look at what is happening now in Ukraine, it has a lot to do with this, and the United States now supports Nazis, plain and simple. So, and the reason the United States supports Nazis not only because of the obviously United States not having anything of likes, absolutely zero experience with the combined arms operations and defending its homeland, and but because there's no culture of this. That is why when I read Paul Fusel's books, especially about World War II, I mean, the guy explains things they're like, oh my God, you know, somebody got maimed or killed. Really? You know what? Tell this to 27 million Soviet people who have been killed, from soldiers to women and children and men, and died from starvation in, let's say, besieged Leningrad and things of this nature. So the scale of numbers matters greatly. This is the fundamental and most influential factor actually informing the view on the war. And of course, the way the view of the war is formed reflects itself not only through the, and for now I will not going to be talking about the fundamental economic issues or the Marx or Adam Smith or those things which basically begin to develop their combined interest, economic interest, and then obviously ideological and cultural, but they are important. But let's take one part of this interest, which are, of course, military-industrial complex. And military-industrial complexes in Russia and United States cannot be more different. They differ dramatically, drastically. And one of the reasons I brought up L.M. Klimov and Come and See, it is only one of few channels which, for example, primarily, and please don't be insulted, but primarily ignorant public in the West can have any kind of idea what combined West was trying to do to Soviet Union, which is historic Russia. And you still cannot convey this to explain to them, and especially to the Americans who are absolutely ignorant, you know, on the issues of real war. And of course, if you look at any officer, any grunt in the US Armed Forces, none of them, zero, zilch, ever fought in defense of the United States proper, and it's the safety of their families, the safety of their property. And I am on the record constantly. That is why, for example, you show to them, we know there are many atrocities committed by the US armed forces, for example, in Afghanistan or Iraq, but they probably saw it, and those who committed that, especially if you look at Abu Ghraib, they were part of it. The problem for them, they never had the ability to project the same things done to them and to their families. Can you imagine any grunt in the United States Armed Forces or any officer or graduate of the West Point or, General Staff, Command and General Staff College in Leavenworth, Kansas, having the projection that, oh my God, my family will be killed, my children will be shot, my wife will be raped and then killed, my property will be burned. No! They don't understand it. They have no any actual reference point, and that is why I always, people will start come with me like, oh God, we had civil war, the war of northern aggression, however you want to call it. Guys, don't even go there. Again, as I stated, the Leningrad alone in 900 days lost about 2.5 times more people in 900 days than throughout all U.S. Civil War. So it's incomparable. You cannot even explain to this how culture and all that form what would be called military doctrine. And so when you have people say, oh, Russians are so obsessed about World War II, really? I think so. If you look at the Russian history, it's all practically non-stop fight of the wars of invasion, primarily by the combined West, but also from the East. And so, again, it's impossible to explain it to, for example, Europeans, let alone to Americans. And that is why when you begin to communicate with any of them, they think that, oh yeah, it's not big. Like The Hill today wrote, oh, Russians are so obsessed about, Sevastopol. Really? Well, how about the United States being obsessed about Dallas or Texas? Not to speak of the fact that how Russians fought for Sevastopol and spilled so much blood. The United States have no even concept. Any from the even American military, they don't have a concept of the amount of sacrifice and TIAs, MIAs, and wounded. So, and that's the problem. This is how you form this fundamental cultural factor, which is in the foundation of developing of the military doctrine, and of course developing based on the military doctrine all those things, approaches, which are industrial approaches, technological approaches, scientific approaches, academic approaches to building your armed forces. And it goes without saying that, for example, Russia and even Soviet Union, they were building forces primarily for defense, despite all kind of the pseudo historical and primitive bullshit by propagandists like Viktor Suvorov, who is actually Mr. Rizun, that's his, I love how he called himself, Suvorov, or some lowlifes like, what's his name, the guy who's British colonel, and Anthony Beaver, who spreads this crap about Russians raping 105 million German women during World War II. So that's what you get. This is crap which is being spread to you. But reality is doctrines, for example, of Russia and United States cannot be more different, because obviously Russians are primarily care about the defense of their motherland. United States doesn't have this necessity in terms of the combined arms operations, because the highest danger United States will ever face will be obviously the war by the drug cartels, and in terms of the lawlessness on the southern border. That's about it. The most what United States fight is obviously expeditionary warfare, which automatically precludes the experiencing of the what is called the spectrum of the invasion, because United States simply doesn't know what real war is. And that is why then you have those people like Mr. Petraeus or King, who wax military while not understanding that they parade themselves as a complete amateurs when they begin to speak about war. Not to speak, of course, about the situation such as the Afghanistan, which was the national embarrassment of the first order, much more embarrassing than those famous Vietnam photos and other places. And that is why when you have difference of the cultural factor in the doctrine, and when you look at your country, at your motherland or homeland or what have you, and you look at how to defend it in United States and its military doctrine, there is, as I already stated, the only force, the only service which really actually does the job and is involved in developing of some kind of defensive postures is the U.S. Navy. U.S. Army has nothing to do with the defense of the motherland. It wouldn't even know how to do it. And you will look at that, for example, the table of organization and equipment of the Russian and American armed forces, especially their ground component, which ground forces. I mean, it's the difference is dramatic. For starters, I will put you one of the major differences here. For example, it's air defense. Russians just, as being the, defensive people, and, seeing how the United States absolutely relies only on the aviation, they know that you have to have a very developed air defense. A Russian ground forces air defense makes United States ground forces air defense look like a backwater, if not to put it even in more strong terms. But while we speak about these details and, oh yeah, this difference, in terms of the details of how the things operate, let me start with this. If you look at this, It is absolutely fascinating document. This is from Cornell Law School, Cornell University, and this is the law, U.S. Code, paragraph 8062, United States Navy composition functions. Look at this code, item B. The naval combat forces of the Navy shall include not less than 11 operational aircraft carriers. Okay, you may say, what does it mean? Well, it means simply that actually American law, the law of the land, so to speak, it actually mandates United States Navy to have no less than 11 acting or being ready aircraft carrier battle groups. You have to have 11 aircraft carriers in different states of the readiness, but you have to have 11 of them. You may say, yeah, well, that probably made sense, for example, in 50s, 60s, even in 70s, when the United States aircraft carriers were the main projection force, power projection force in the United States. And of course, it was had very little to do with defense. But today, when we speak about, for example, of the proliferation and development, very advanced anti-shipping missile technologies, one begins to ask the question, wait a minute, why do you need to mandate something to the weapon system which already today is essentially redundant or obsolete? And if you look at my previous videos, you will see yourself, including my quote from Russian Defense Minister Mr. Shoigu, who stated, we don't need aircraft carriers, Russia, meaning in those numbers as the United States has. We need the weapons which will sink them. Russia has all of those weapons, and it will sink, in the case of real war, pretty much any aircraft carrier of the United States Navy, or for that matter, Royal Navy, at will, because the weapons which Russia deploys today and uses them, including in the special military operation, they completely outrange anything the aircraft carrier can possibly even deploy. So, and when you look at this and say, wait a minute, why would you come up with this, and why you would, say that you are mandated by law, and this law is not going to change for a long time. It's not very easy to do it. So, well, that tells you the attitude to the war. That tells you how, cavalier and at the same time illiterate the United States has the attitude towards a real war. And I don't need to go to speaking about Rickover and his basically testimony to the congressional committee about, for example, U.S. Navy carriers in 1980 already, that he stated they probably not going to survive 24 hours in real war. But hey, that's the funny thing. When you do not have those experiences with the real war, when you do not have this cultural DNA developed in your nation, which looks at the war as the horrifying affair, and you need to defend that nation from that horrifying affair, of course you can afford to come up with those laws and continue to manufacture and waste your money essentially onto, for example, a system which is senile. The aircraft carrier as such as the real fighting force for the Navy is a senile weapon system. It doesn't mean that they need to go away completely, but obviously United States having 11 or even 20 aircraft carrier groups, not only that the United States cannot afford it, it never could, but now it's absolutely cannot afford. It is the fact that obviously it's a waste of money, and that's how the American United States military industrial complex operates, because it operates on the completely abstract and combat unproven issues. And it especially reflects the way, for example, American ground forces are and the way American military industrial complex is. So, in this case, to understand the difference, and again, it is a very long conversation. I can continue it for hours and hours. Let me demonstrate to you some crucial differences. But let's first talk about some crucial commonalities. Generally speaking, as it is the case in, let's call them parliamentary democracies, the process of the developing of the doctrine and adaptation it in legislative terms is pretty much somewhat common between Russia and obviously the United States. And guess what? In the United States, US Congress has the power of purse. And this is the Congress, it is the Congress which finances that. In Russia, it's kind of similar, but in the same dramatically different. Obviously, the State Duma, also two chambers, upper chamber of the Federation Council, and obviously Duma itself, which is lower chamber, they do also approve budgets. They do also have sort of the power of the purse, but it is extremely limited compared to the, for example, United States Congress. And here's the difference. Let's take a look how Russians define how you basically create your military budget and how it should look like, for example, through the thing which is called in Russia State Defense Order, which is GOZ, and in Russian it's GOZ, which is Gosobоронзаказ. Russia had several of those state defense orders. They have been, I believe, 5. I could be wrong, but it doesn't matter. So after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and look at this. And this is, I will translate it for you. Look at this. The fundamental laws which define the and basically give definitions to what you can base your state defense order are number of the federal laws. Here are they in the top. You don't need to know those laws, but they are federal laws accepted by or basically approved by Duma. And they also define who are the participants of the state defense order. But look at this. Here are the stages, and they are in the bullet points, and as you can see yourself, they have this fat, dark font. Look at this about the formation of the state defense order. The state as in the nation state, and state as in government, is forming this state defense order based on the military doctrine, the plans of the building and development of the armed forces of the Russian Federation, and what is called ГПБ, which is the state program of the armaments. And look at this. After that, second thing which happens, the approval of the state defense order comes through the government of the Russian Federation, which approves the state defense order and defines those who will be doing the orders, and then obviously it begins to do the what is called the basically tenders, and it defines the subcontractors or contractors. And as you can see yourself, throughout after it defined it, you will see the item of the signing the contracts, and then of course Federal Anti-Monopoly Service controls it together with other different services, for example like FSB. And here comes the issue. Does Russia have corruption? Oh, absolutely. Nobody says that Russia is this, land of milk and honey and nothing happens there. If you want to see how this, for example, state defense order could be sabotaged, well, not necessarily sabotaged for the political gain, but sabotaged for the, for example, a monetary gain, you can take a look at the very difficult fate of the spaceport Vostochny in the far east of Russia. And this was the basically the whole the thriller, so to speak, when Mr. Rogozin had to clean those dirty stables, and because what was happening, they were stealing money. You cannot steal money on the while you form the state order and while you form the state program of the armaments. You cannot do it there because it's done on the top political and military and economic level. But for example, you can steal money. Yeah, if you are a contractor, one of the corporations which was building this Vostochny spaceport, which is now pretty much completed as was supposed to be on time, and it's still developing as the whole other thing, but it's already workable installation. Huge money, gigantic money. which went into building it, billions of dollars, if you want to hear it about dollars. Now, let me tell you, they were jacking prices, they were stealing there, they were delaying the production and building, and yeah, then, of course, yeah, top state organs of the security and anti-economic crime, they finally got involved and cleaned that whole horrible situation there. This is the level at which you can basically steal money and corrupt the system. So obviously you also had people from the FSB, Russia's security service, which were also dealing with this. And they say, yeah, but other than that, Russians, especially Russians who understand what real war is and who have a very different views on the weapon system and how they have to operate and work and defend the country, this is where there are basically major difference begin to manifest itself. And here it is. Look at this. While Russians form and then execute their state defense order, why don't we open this part? And this is front page of the Congressional Pig Book. It's Organization of the Citizens Against Government Waste. And it's not only that, there are other basically organizations and communities which deal with the situation of the American defense budget. And look at this. The Congressional Pig Book is this organization's annual compilation of the pork barrel projects in the federal budget. A pork project is the line item in the appropriations bill that designates tax dollars for a specific purpose in circumvention of established budgetary procedures. And guess what it is? These are those famous earmarks. That is why, for example, when you look at the defense budget of the United States, it's just gigantic book, hundreds upon hundreds of pages of detailing things, and some of this naturally top secret, and that's the way it should be, basically. But here it is. Look what happens, which doesn't happen in Russia on the top legislative and government levels, but it happens in the United States. Look at this. This is just one of the small list, it's huge actually, of the earmarks in the defense budget. Just to give you example on the defense budget for finance years 2021 and 2022. There are only 4 out of 147 earmarks have been removed from that. But still, earmarks of pork barreling continued on the legislative level in the United States. That means U.S. Congress, which has the power of the purse. And look what we had there. We had $8 billion in 2022, which were involving for things which are, you know what, they are not really things which are needed for the United States defense. For example, more than $2 billion for 44 anonymous earmarks for health and disease research under Defense Health Program. And if you look at this article, it's Mr. McCain was one of the larger abusers, late John McCain, who was doing those earmarks. Then you go to $240 million for 2 earmarks finding modernization of the M1 Abrams, which, by the way, is the obsolete tank nowadays for a number of reasons. Yet they continue for the research and modernization of the tank, which is, pardon my French, absolutely not suited for the fight in the modern battlefield. And you're gonna go through this list of the earmarks, which are billions upon billions of dollars, and when you begin to look at it, and this is just defense budget, you begin to see it in the budget, all kinds of the articles of the budgeting, from civilian sectors to obviously military, and this is horrifying. Basically, what is happening, it is approved and legal corruption. People stick the items in the defense budget which do not reflect absolutely any kind of defense doctrine, because United States still continues to produce things like, and actually if you read and you go to the website of of this organization, among many other organizations which observe, including Congressional Budget Office, by the way, and which observe basically the waste of money and corruption happening on the top echelons of the legislative power, you'll find yourself that people say, yes, yeah, littoral combat ships, multi-billion, well, tens of billions actually, program with the, both classes of the ships basically removed now from service because that's how bad they are. Their engines are bad, their gearboxes are bad, they are not really seaworthy ships, they have zero real weapons. And you can read the definition of the littoral corrupt ships, what they call it in the US Navy. And when you begin to go article by article, you begin to understand that this is a horrendous waste. And this waste starts on the fundamental legislative top level government level, which tells you that actually the United States doesn't have really serious military doctrine because it doesn't have to. That's the whole point. The only doctrine the United States can have is the doctrine of the expeditionary wars, and those have nothing to do with, in reality of the war, with the serious combined arms, massive scale combined arms operations, as we observe, for example, in Ukraine. And by the way, I want to stress again, Russians are using their only small portion of their forces. We probably will see they are developing more towards the end of this year into something else strategically, but I'm not going to go there for now. So, and when you look at this, this is when you begin to recognize, goodness gracious, it is absolutely completely different story. There are two systems incompatible, and that is why I always say, and I will repeat myself, clone myself, pardon for being not humble, but I said, Russian weapon systems and Russian organization is designed to kill the enemy. United States basically military-industrial complex is primarily, not all of it, but primarily is the JOBS program, and that's what it is. American weapons are designed primarily to make profit. That's it. And the difference in this particular case starts on the top governmental and legislative level. In Russia, for activities which are happening in the US Congress in terms of the appropriations and budgeting of the military-industrial complex and military in Russia, you would be immediately arrested and put in jail. You still can steal some money and corrupt things down the road, but on the top level, it's inconceivable for Russians to have on some program like be that Zircon or newest nuclear submarines or whatever, to have some kind of earmarks because some senator or some basically Duma parliamentary decides, oh yeah, let's stick some numbers there and some money for some stupid program which nobody needs. And for example, there are occasions on which Pentagon was trying to fight what has been imposed on it are well recorded, and we'll be talking about this more down the road because this is a very voluminous topic. But for now, I can tell you one thing, precisely because no US senator, congressman, politician, military ever experienced what Russians experienced as a nation, which was very well shown by Mr. Ilem Klimov. That is why United States is basically indeed a subject of the Pentagon Wars movie, which is a comedy how they created this absolutely lumbering piece of crap called Armored Personnel Carrier Bradley. And that is the real serious issue. And it's political too. And that is why you cannot change it in the United States until the United States is defeated completely, ultimately on the battlefield, or it's going to collapse economically, which is happening as I speak to you now. So I will stop on this today, but this is the part 2. We will continue talking about the fundamental cultural and economic differences in the deployment of the weapons, including their design, and how they are financed. And this is what I want to end up today for you guys for the weekend, so to speak. As always, I want to thank my wonderful supporters on Patreon and those people who buy me Jack Daniels. And guys, if you like what I do, please support me on Patreon or subscribe to my channel. And I'll be talking to you later. Bye-bye. Have a nice weekend.